Jason X is better than you remember. Hear me out, it's bad. I know it's bad. You're already writing a comment about how I've finally gone off the deep end, how I've become so poisoned by weird Christian VHS tapes from the 80s that I'll accept the meagerest rations for nourishment. But stick with me. I know Jason X is a bad movie. It's amateurish, silly, and a bit saggy even at a cool 93 minutes, but it's a triumphant failure. A film where the ambitions of the filmmakers outpaced both budget and talent. A delightfully self-aware little trash pile that acknowledges its own ridiculousness and squeezes a lot of fun gore, sci-fi shenanigans, and ludicrously over-the-top moments out of its laughably small budget. While it may not be the best Friday the 13th movie by a long shot, I'm not willing to have that argument, it gets ugly. This glorified filler movie made with the efficient precision of Canadian television was the perfect playground for a filmmaker with Aliens-era James Cameron aspirations on a Piranha 2-era James Cameron budget. And it straddles that nearly impossible to define line between so bad it's good and actually kind of fun. Nobody at New Line really cared about Jason X. It was more an obligation than a passion. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, was not good. People didn't like it, it barely made any money and left almost no cultural impact, with the exception of its final shot, which saw the gloved hand of Freddy Krueger dragging Jason's hockey mask to hell, setting up a potential showdown in the form of Freddy vs. Jason, an option available to New Line now that they had the rights to both franchises. Quick aside, because I'll probably never cover it on the channel, Freddy vs. Jason is exactly the right kind of stupid, and it's an absolute blast. Of the big-budget blockbuster horror mashups of the early aughts, it's the clear winner. Anyway, much like Jason, Freddy vs. Jason was trapped in its own kind of hell. Development hell. So in lieu of their inevitable box office behemoth, they needed another inexpensive installment in the Friday the 13th franchise to keep the pot boiling, to keep the series relevant, or at the very least, on life support. Due to the ending of Jason Goes to Hell, though, any new Friday the 13th film couldn't directly continue the story of the saga, so they had to improvise. And they threw around a bunch of really, truly, exceptionally dumb ideas. And they went with the dumbest one. And I thank them. It's the one idea that truly shows that your franchise has run out of juice both creatively and narratively. A dubious legacy shared by Friday the 13th, Hellraiser, Leprechaun, and James Bond. They set the film nearly 500 years in the future and took Jason to space. Space Jason. Space-in. Instead of their other ideas that included Jason in the Snow or Jason in New York, again, we get a story that sees Jason captured in an underground facility run by the US military. Our final girl, played by Andromeda's Lexa Doig, put a pin in that, is accidentally cryogenically frozen with Jason after he escapes when a scientist, played by David Cronenberg, let's go ahead and keep a little pile of pins handy, okay? Accidentally allows Jason to escape when trying to move him to another facility to test his regenerative capabilities. 455 years in the future, a group of horny archaeological grad students finds Jason and Lexa Doig while sifting through the facility on a field trip to the blasted remains of Earth. They bring them both back to their spaceship en route to Earth 2, revive Doig, and when the professor learns that Jason is worth a fortune, they hold on to his corpse instead of chucking it out the airlock, giving him a chance to thaw out and wake up, and to quote Dave Barry, I am not making this up, through a spider sense-like power to detect horniness in teens, and resume his murderous rampage in this new contained environment. Wacky sci-fi murders and good old-fashioned stabbing ensue. Eventually, he's blown up by Lisa Ryder, also from Andromeda, pin that, who plays an android that's strong enough to take Jason on and win. However, he's stitched back together by nanotechnology and becomes Uber Jason, the long-lost member of Slipknot. He rampages some more, they defeat him by burning him up in the atmosphere of Earth 2, and a couple watches a quote-unquote shooting star crash into a nearby lake. They vow to check it out, the morons that they are. Shot of the newfangled techno mask sinking into the lake, and roll credits over a song that sounds like it was made by visiting a guitar center with a field recorder on a busy Saturday afternoon, and just capturing the raw, discordant wailing of all of the disparate customers trying to play Stairway to Heaven and Smoke on the Water at the same time. So the whole thing is pretty boilerplate, sure, but it's also way more fun than it has any right to be. The story is ruthlessly efficient and self-aware. Efficient could be easily replaced with simplistic or underbaked, sure, but it borrows, or as writer Todd Farmer would pretty readily admit to, steals from the plot structure of both Alien and Aliens, and it's a surprisingly great fit for a Jason film. The structure lets us start with that same creeping, ever-present horror that the xenomorph has in Alien, but allows us to transition seamlessly to the unstoppable action of the xenomorphs in Aliens. You get Jason in a confined space, varying levels of combat competence from your victims so it's not just a one-sided slaughter fest, a ticking clock, and a final girl with a connection to our baddie who has an active role in the story. Throw all of that at Jason and you get the first interesting Friday the 13th movie since Jason Lives, even if it's for all the wrong reasons. Don't come at me for that take, by the way. I'm not a Friday the 13th superfan, I have no skin in the game. And Todd Farmer's omnipresent self-awareness in the screenplay, influenced by the runaway success of Scream, makes for a surprisingly sharp bite that pokes fun at the film industry's need to endlessly perpetuate franchises that have long run out of steam. He accomplishes this through a sort of Aliens-adjacent dystopian super-horny super-capitalism that feels like it sits nicely alongside other, admittedly smarter sci-fi satires like Starship Troopers.
That's not Jason Voorhees, is it?
What do you know about him?
Under the right buyer, he could be worth a fortune.
I've got him frozen right here on the ship.
While this casual disregard for the continuity and oppressive lore of the series could be seen as disrespectful to a franchise that a lot of people have an intense devotion to, by freeing themselves from it, the filmmakers create a playground that allows them to experiment formally with things that would have otherwise broken the Jason universe, while simultaneously retaining the fundamental spirit of the Friday the 13th saga. And Jason X has the benefit of quarantining itself inside the awful, lovely, early aughts era of nu metal horror. Quite possibly the low point of horror as a genre. Maybe it's the nostalgia goggles though, but I have a soft spot for it. Nu metal horror sat in a fascinatingly tacky intersection of post-Matrix sci-fi trappings, Y2K era design, and the early obsession with CGI that made all of the films of its ilk, Final Destination, 13 Ghosts, Resident Evil, Dracula 2000, Underworld, Ghost Ship, and countless others between 1999 and 2006, feel so oddly coherent in a shared, glossy terribleness that mirrored its namesake musical genre. But within that gloss and overbearing aesthetic dorkiness lies a film with more ambition than resources, a movie that genuinely wanted to deliver something astonishing, funny, and novel, despite its paltry $5 million budget. James Isaac, the director, was a puppet and creature effects guy who had worked closely with David Cronenberg on The Fly, Naked Lunch, and Existenz, a relationship that led to Cronenberg agreeing to do a pretty delightful cameo, and that Cronenbergian creature sensibility is reflected throughout Jason X. The gore effects, kills, and creature designs are all top-notch, suitably grisly, and genuinely quite impressive given the limitations they were working under. Even on such a small budget, the kills, the meat and potatoes of any good slasher movie, are totally solid here too. They're delightfully fresh, taking full advantage of this new sci-fi playground for gags that feel singularly Friday the 13th, but totally unique to the setting. Their lack of funding also unexpectedly led to a lot of innovations that would go on to influence both the production and post-production pipelines for film and television. Oddly, Jason X shares a lot of the same post-production processes with Oh Brother Where Art Thou, which pioneered the technique of scanning the film into the computer from the original 35mm negative and completely editing and processing the film digitally. While Oh Brother did this for the total control of the color of their movie, Jason X did this purely as a cost-saving feature. By not producing an interpositive or having to do process shots to get effects onto the film itself, they saved a pretty big chunk of change. And on a related note, instead of shooting the film across 4 perforations of 35mm film, the standard Hollywood shooting method that gives you the quote-unquote Academy ratio of 1.33 to 1, they opted to shoot it in 3 perforations, seeing as their film scanner could only accommodate 16:9 imagery anyway, squeezing the image down somewhat and saving 20% on their film stock. These sorts of cost-cutting methods would trickle down into TV production and lower-budget film production, with the byproduct of creating the modern digital color correction workflow. The whole production of the film had this beautiful combination of innovation and thriftiness. Sure, it ends up looking like they shot on the sets of Xenon Girl of the 21st Century After Hours, in a setup not entirely unlike the 1931 Mexican Dracula film, and yeah, the costumes look like they're straight out of a sci-fi porn parody of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but actually, you know, I just described 2 wonderfully kitschy Y2K era things. Those are both unambiguous positives. Jason X is also deeply Canadian in that low-budget horror, late-night sci-fi channel sort of way. No money? Shoot in Vancouver. Hire the most affordable TV actors Canada has to offer. Get David Cronenberg in there to give you an air of legitimacy. It's okay, he'll rewrite his own lines to make himself sound cooler.
Well, you can't. I haven't prepped the cryostasis chamber.
I don't want him frozen, Rowan. I want him soft.
The film features an almost entirely unknown Canadian cast, with only Lisa Ryder and Lexa Doig standing out. Mostly because in less than a year, they'd both go on to star in the long-running syndicated sci-fi epic Andromeda, alongside perpetually Twitter-ratioed Kevin Sorbo, in roles that are the exact opposite of what they were playing here, with Lexa Doig as the ship's computer and Lisa Ryder as the human rogue. The performances here are almost across the board bad, but in that spirited kind of way that's almost expected in movies of this caliber. Lisa Ryder in particular is playing a sort of Canadian Kmart Mila Jovovich, and she's having a damn good time showing her journey from glorified sex bot to hyperpowered badass killing machine to sentient severed head. This is all to say, Canada, be proud of this movie. Hold it in your canon. Put it on your money. You can't force so bad it's good. Every time a filmmaker tries, they make something truly unwatchable. It's the difference between a totally misguided passion project like The Room, or a work of absolute hubris and excess of a filmmaker high off his own supply like Cats, and something cynically crafted to be meme-worthy with the lowest amount of effort. See any Asylum-produced movie, most notably the god-awful and genuinely soul-crushing Sharknado series, or any of the countless winking quote-unquote parodies where the joke is how little effort the filmmakers put into making the movie funny or compelling.
Because the truth is, after 10 movies, or after 9 movies, then, if you're taking yourself seriously, you're kind of an idiot.
And there's a world of difference between not taking yourself too seriously and not trying. More people put love, work, and passion into Jason X than anybody put into Sharknado. Nobody at Asylum loved Sharknado until it made them a ton of money. There's an uncommon amount of belief behind the production of Jason X, an uncommon amount of effort to create something that's broadly enjoyable with a self-aware tone that makes it surprisingly buoyant. It often gets quite close to that line between so bad it's good and uncomplicatedly good. Is it always successful? Not really. But that blind belief in the project combined with its light tone leads to a fairly even hit rate of moments that are unintentionally and intentionally funny.
Sarge, we found Condor.
What's his condition?
He's screwed.
Oh, this sucks on so many levels!
It's gonna take more than a poke in the ribs to put down this old dog. Yeah. That ought to do it.
Sometimes something magical happens. A franchise loses its value so dramatically or gets so long in the tooth that the cynical suits that own the intellectual property take their eyes off of it for just long enough that something wild, interesting, or hilariously catastrophic happens. Sometimes it's a combination of all three. And in that lack of oversight, you can get something spirited but stupid, interesting but flawed. And Jason X is one of those rare little miracles. Jason X is not only better than you remember, it's better than its fate. To be thoroughly ignored and derided by fans of the series, lambasted by critics, and underseen by the public at large, locked away as a glorified extra that only comes with a $150 box set of Blu-rays. So this Halloween, when you're going through your spooky favorites, make some room for something with a sci-fi flair. Throw Jason X in there, turn your critical thinking skills down by about 40%, and appreciate one of the most earnestly silly slasher films of all time. Thank you all for watching Too Many Tapes. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon to get updates for when I upload videos. Also, there's a Too Many Tapes t-shirt now with the logo on it if that's your sort of thing. Link in the description. What's your favorite nu metal horror film? I have a weird soft spot for the butterfly effect, but I can't defend it. How about you? Let me know in the comments. If you want to help out a small YouTube channel, consider donating $1 or more a month to my Patreon. Your generous donations let me track down a Blu-ray copy of Jason X from eBay that came in a little paper sleeve like somebody was burning me a mix CD in the mid-aughts. If you donate $50 or more a month like Cammy, you get a spooky season recommendation. For your Halloween viewing, I recommend Gore Verbinski's 2017 film, A Cure for Wellness. It's 2.5 hours of endlessly gorgeous cinematography, Jason Isaacs tearing up the screen, weird European cult vibes, and eels. It's a great time. And Chase, this Halloween I'm recommending Phil Tippett's Mad God, a 2021 stop-motion film 30 years in the making that is just so oddly visceral. It's filled to the brim with bad feelings, weird gore, and ruminations on war, and I think you're gonna love it. It's on Shudder. If you donate $20 or more a month, you're NATO Kitsch. And one of these days I'll download Friday the 13th on PS5 and we'll play, even though they don't have Uber Jason. For $10 or more a month, you're an unexpected David Cronenberg cameo, because you're always a pleasant surprise, and your name gets to be pretty big in the credits too. And for $5 a month, you're hand-wavy sci-fi nanobots, because you swarm to create greatness, and you get early access to my videos. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Too Many Tapes.
Lucky you weren't alive during the Microsoft conflict. Hell, we were beating each other with our own severed limbs.